Okay, 1:30. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Board of Adjustment. If everybody would silence their cell phones, that would be greatly appreciated. Next item is to receive the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look those over?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, cast your votes. Okay. Next, Kathy requests continuance withdrawal by staff of the applicants.
We have two today. Item number 13, case number 13598, is requesting a continuance to June 5th. And item number 14, case number 13830, is requesting to be withdrawn.
Anybody here on either of those? Got a motion? Any questions, comments?
I'd do a motion jointly on number 13 and 14. Number 13 to be continued to June 5th, and number 14 to be withdrawn.
Second. Motion is second. Any discussion? Cast your votes. All right. Thank you. Requests continuance, withdrawal by the public.
Good afternoon, David Box. I would request that case number 12, 13883, be continued to the May 1st docket.
Is anybody here on that one? Okay.
I'd make a motion to continue it.
Second. And motion is second. If there's any discussion, if not, cast your votes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, first one. No. First one, please.
Item number 1, case number 13880, request for use variance of Gastar Exploration USA for permit to drill an oil gas well located at 12103 North Cemetery Road.
Okay. Come on up, please. Whoops. Okay. You give us your name and address and go ahead and speak to the application, please.
I'm sorry. My name is Jack Elliott, and I work for Gastar Exploration, Inc.
Okay.
Do you want my home residence or my?
That'll work.
Gastar Exploration, Inc., they're at 3030 Northwest Expressway, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your application, please.
Well, Gastar is in the process of wanting to drill a well within Oklahoma City, and as we're seeking a variance. We have given out the proper note, we've given out the notice. Some of our plans. So we're actually, as I said, wanting a variance to drill a horizontal well in Section 18 of 13 North, 5 West.
All right. We've got one letter. Let's see.
Actually, we've got two. But I'm sorry, it's 1913-5, excuse me.
Okay. I got one in my packet, and then we had, the other one, you're right. And then I've got some folks signed up who want to speak to this. So first, is Barbara Cox here? Come on up. Yeah, that'd be fine. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Barbara Cox. My address is 12101 North Cemetery Road.
Okay.
You can see my property, I believe, at the top of your diagram there. I'm objecting to the entirety of this well being drilled. Myself, my neighbors have one sole source of water, and that is our private water wells. We have no residential water. We have no other access to water. I've spoken with Braden Pollard, and he has told me that they are wanting to drill a horizontal well. It will be fracked. I have all sorts of problems with that methodology. I don't know that there could be a guarantee to me or to my neighbors that our water source will not be compromised in some way. The other part that affects me more than any of my neighbors is I found out Tuesday evening from Mr. Pollard that they plan to access the drill site by constructing a road directly adjacent to my driveway. On the other, there's a barbed wire fence. My driveway is on the north side, and they want to construct a road on the south side of that. I have a diagram that Mr. Pollard actually gave me that shows a little bit better if you're interested in seeing it. Good. I asked Mr. Pollard about the number of trucks that would be accessing this road, the time of day, the dirt, the noise, the light. That would be for 30, 60 days through the drilling and completion process. Some of the questions he was able to answer, some of them he said were out of his realm of expertise. I was not offered anything, any sort of damages, any sort of payment for my inconvenience, my annoyance during the 60 days probably of the activity that's going on. This is my home. The wind comes out of the south most days, which means the dirt, the dust will be on my property, my animals, my house, my car, everything. And I just wanted to let you guys know that this is not, as it might seem, agricultural area. You might think about a cornfield. No, these are acreages with nice homes on them, and residents with children and pets and animals and vegetables. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions?
Not at this time. I'd give the applicant a chance to rebut and then call the other speaker.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, you know, if we could, I mean, first of all, we certainly are not trying to minimize your concerns. We're really not. I mean, that's not our purpose. The area we're involved in, you know, if you take the township 13 North 5 West, there has been, we saw based on Pangea public records, 74 wells that have been drilled in the last 5 years. So this area is not totally foreign to drilling, as most of the Oklahoma City areas you're aware of is not. And obviously, Braden Pollard is here with me. He's another landman for Chesapeake who actually, Gaspar, who met with Barbara, and he can go into more specifics if you want to. But essentially, you know, as you know, the city sets out safeguards on noise and nuisances in 37-87, and we plan to comply with that, and all the state rules and regulations are set out. She is correct that when we drill our well, it could take 30 to 45, and could be longer if there's problems, but that's, hopefully, you know, that's going to be necessary to go under to drill our well.
I'd like to interrupt for a second. You know, one thing that I think we have to acknowledge is that the area is changed. Historically, that may have been, you know, very few homes, and drilling may have been permitted and perhaps appropriate in that area. But as that area has developed and you've got homeowners and more activity up there, I think just because we have doesn't necessarily, you know, create a precedence for doing it now or in the future. And I think clearly that area has changed over the years, and it's not what it was when perhaps earlier drilling activity was approved.
If you could, Braden, you want to talk about what, how we selected the location and tried to minimize the surface use?
We selected the location in the north half of the northeast quarter. Sorry, yes. We selected the location in the north half of the northeast quarter where it's located. It's directly in between two homes. One is Mrs. Cox and the other is in the southwest quarter of the section above. We're 1,000 feet or greater from both of those homes. The requirements for the variance request is to go out as far as it need be to reach 10 owners. We went out to 1,400 feet to reach those, to meet our minimum of 10 owners. And I believe it was 12 owners that our 1,400-foot radius reached. The road on the surface owner's property, after talking with him, would create the least amount of inconvenience for him running it along the north side of the road, or I'm sorry, the north side of the property on the south side of the fence, instead of putting it directly in the middle of his property. There are creeks in the area that we have to operate around. That kind of dictated where we went with our road, and this was the best possible scenario for both landowner and company alike. So.
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The surface owner lives in Dallas. And I believe it's a segmented ownership that his sisters live in California. There is no structure on this 80 acres. None. There's just trees. They could have gone in the middle of the property. They could have gone in a clearer area with their road, and they're choosing not to do that. No one lives on the property. The surface owner, so when you say it's convenient to him, I'm not sure what that means.
Whether or not he lives there or not is not really what our concern is with what he does with his property. It was his request that if he were to develop it in the future, that's not for me to say what he wanted to do, that road would be best for him if he decided to develop it or sell it, whatever he may plan to do in the future. My opinion or my input on what's best for him is I can't make that decision. This was just after an agreement that him and I came to, along with the rest of the family and other owners.
Let me give everybody an opportunity to be heard. I've also got Neil Garrison signed up. Neil?
Thank you very much.
My name is Neil Garrison. I live at 12601 North Cemetery Road, and that's immediately north of Barbara Cox's house. My wife and I live there on the site. We own the land, the home, and it may be, an agricultural area, but again, this is our home. We've got cow pastures and stuff around us, but it's our home. My biggest concern is our water supply. We live within Oklahoma City, but we don't have access to a water line. Like Barbara Cox, I get my water out of a water well, and I met with Mr. Pollard on Tuesday and expressed my concern, and to me, I felt like my concern was minimalized. There was emphasis placed on the sharp end of the stick when they do the drilling and stuff is going to be X number of thousands of feet below my water table, below my aquifer, but nevertheless, aquifers being what it is, he's still penetrating the aquifer, and there's going to be transport up and down of all types of chemical fluids and everything, and I've been reassured that, well, we've got these casings around the drill pipe and all this stuff, but still, in a realistic world, where out of sight, out of mind, it would be awful difficult if there was some kind of problem. Who's going to be able to go up there and say definitively that, well, a problem that's developed in your drinking water or whatever, what is the source? If it's not right there in front of you, it would be extremely difficult to figure that out. So what I'm doing is I'm saying that I have a stake in this. Maybe my home falls a little ways outside of the circle and everything, but it's still close. I'm Barbara Cox's neighbor. I, like her, have to rely on my drinking water coming out of the same aquifer that she's in, and I'm just concerned about this activity having an impact on my home, and particularly that aspect of my home, my only source of drinking water. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Garrison?
Do you own the minerals on your property?
No.
Ms. Cox, do you own the minerals on your property? Okay. Just a couple of questions. Number one, do you guys have valid leases to drill this well?
Yes, sir.
Number two, are you in compliance with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission rules and regulations on drilling this well?
Absolutely.
Are you putting in adequate subsurface casing to protect the water supply?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are there any engineering reports that exist to this date to suggest that the water will have some type of potential problem by your drilling activities?
No, we've had our engineers review that, yes, sir.
And the last question I'd have, as far as surface damages, have you complied with the Surface Damage Act and paid all appropriate fees and payments pursuant to that act?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we have.
Is there anywhere else you could put that road that might appease Ms. Cox and the current landowner?
Well, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but as you know, horizontal wells basically run from north to south. We're doing them north to south. We own Section 19 as one unit by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. So we want to start our well, the geology at the top of where that's at the top of the section or unit and go all the way to the south. We can't really put one in the middle or anything, or else that would keep us from, drilling our lateral.
Okay. All right.
And I believe you might have been asking about the access road other than the pad.
Yep.
South of the 80 acres, so in the south half of this quarter, there is another neighborhood with several homes.
Okay.
Moving it further south would impede on them as well,
Okay.
and that's also another reason we decided on the north side. It would have, if 122nd, which dead ends in the Cemetery Road, were to continue, this would be the continuation of that road, following 122nd.
Ms. Cox, do you have anything from the Oklahoma Corporation Commission that suggests this well will create a problem for the aquifer in its drilling?
I do not. I only found out about this a few days ago. This was
And so
totally.
Have you consulted or spoken with an engineer to see if there's any concerns or problems?
I have not. But my question is, what does moving the road have to do with where they're drilling?
Well, I think under the Surface Damage Act, they have to comply with the landowner and come up with a feasible road. And I think that, I can't give you legal advice, but if they move the road somewhere else, then you may have other neighbors complaining. And so once you pay for these leases, you're going to put in a road somewhere, and it's not going to make everybody happy. And so if you are suggesting that you need some additional time to consult with an engineer, if you have something that you can show us from the OCC, it seems to me that they're in compliance with the law.
Is it possible for us to require periodic testing of the water supply out there to see whether there's any damage that's being done to it?
That's regulated by the OCC.
It is. Are they required to do that periodically?
I know that the Oklahoma Corporation Commission sets certain requirements on the subsurface casing from spudding to what's your depth?
We're required to put a conductor casing down to bedrock, and inside that we have a surface casing which is down to the base of the treatable water 50 feet below. In this case, Ms. Cox's well is the deepest point at 240 feet. Our base of treatable water is at 900 feet, so our surface casing will be 50 feet at least below that. We've been putting surface casing down to 1150. Typically it's 100 feet, it's just down to bedrock. Average 80 to 110, I'll say, is what we've done so far.
What's her well out here?
240 feet. But I also will say her well from our wellhead is a third of a mile. It's approximately 1,000.
What's your primary objectives? What formations are you going to be producing from?
The Hunton.
And how deep is that?
In the area, 65 to 7,000
So
feet.
that's at 7,000 feet, and the aquifer's at 240 feet approximately?
Yes.
Okay.
Does anybody else have questions?
I was going to say previously, even though we can't require water testing, we have asked the applicant to talk to concerned neighbors and to offer to, test so that you create a baseline, and then to offer to test periodically, whatever they can agree.
I have seen people do that where before the well is drilled, they test their water, and they have a sample, and they're willing to share it. They give both sides get a sample of it. Something you jointly do together. That would be a private agreement between you all, but that way you have proof on what your water content was at the time, salinity, et cetera. And that may be something you want to do, but it appears to me that these folks are in compliance with the commission and with the state legislation.
And what we're charged with is balancing their right to do business and to pursue their business interests with your rights and his rights as homeowners, and the possible interruption of your, and I think, for the road and the dust, are the regulations, Mark, that address that to try to protect adjacent homeowners? So again, when they comply with all the rules and regulations and the laws that are in place, but what you may want to do is excuse yourselves, during this meeting, and see if you can come to an arrangement regarding testing of water and creating a baseline.
If you guys want to take a break and just visit with her for a second, we'll put you later on the agenda. We like all neighbors to get along if possible.
Let me ask one question. Go ahead.
Just part of the mitigation just of the dust and so forth, do you sprinkle the road and or the site during drilling so that not quite so much dust is kicked up?
As I told Ms. Fox when I met with her, if there's a complaint with dust or with speed, we have our phone number. There's a contact number on the front of the sign, and she has my card as well. I told her to contact me if there's ever a problem with dust or with the upkeep of the road that she can call, and we will address that, whether it be packing the road or spraying it down or requiring our service, whoever's servicing our wells, to slow down, to make sure they're going slow. So
I'm guessing you ought to just pencil in that it needs to be sprinkled every so often, and whether that's every 2 days or every week, or I don't know, but that's just going to be an issue. It just is.
I've got one other letter of protest. Carver, did I say that right? Is anybody here? Okay.
The other thing I'd tell you, Ms. Cox, is that there is a Oklahoma Corporation Commission agent that's assigned to your region, your area, and if you're having problems, you can always contact them.
Okay. Thank you.
So is it okay if we let them visit for a minute?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll just roll it around to the end of the docket, if that's okay. All right, we'll roll you around to the end of the docket. See you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, next one, please.
Item number 2, case number 13875, application for special exception of White Operating Company to convert an existing oil gas well to a disposal well located at 2611 South Stiles Avenue.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. I'm Wayne Smith, 7011 North Robinson, here on behalf of White Operating. This is a pretty typical conversion of an existing older producing oil and gas well to disposal service, and as such would be removing any pumping type equipment on the surface except for disposal pump, which is a low profile system. The fluids will be transported to this site via pipelines, so there'll be minimal traffic. Other than that, the conversion has been approved by the state of Oklahoma, the UIC department, for disposal. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any neighbors objecting today?
I have had no comment.
Does anybody here want to speak to this one? Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Got a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 13868, application for special exception of Midtown Builders to allow multifamily residential development located at 604 through 628 Northwest 21st Street.
Go ahead,
Marva Ellard from Midtown Builders, 1521 North Chartel. Since we met about 4 weeks ago, we have met again with the Historic Preservation Commission, and Katie Friddle is here to answer any questions about their recommendation on our request for a special exception. I understand that they have approved multifamily in the large building and condo uses on the 2 vacant lots. We met last week with the Mesta Park Board of Directors and received a vote of approval for the project with the same conditions.
First of all, let me apologize to you. I was really speaking out of turn the last time we were all here together. I offered to meet with you and help, work out all these details, and shortly thereafter got a call from staff to remind me that I'm not allowed to do that. I'm very sorry.
That's all right.
When you refer to the vacant lots on which condos will be built, are we talking about areas that are right now being used for parking?
Commissioner Powers, at least half of each of those lots is being used for parking. There's fences that screen it right now from 21st Street, but there's parking behind it.
I have some real concern about that, I have to tell you. The idea of using the existing buildings for multifamily development, I think, makes sense. And I know that there are neighbors who have concerns about the rental versus ownership, and I can certainly sympathize with those, but from a land use standpoint, anybody who owns anything can rent it, so we don't really look so much at that aspect of it. While I can certainly see that some people would feel that there would be more coming and going from apartments just in terms of residents. I don't really feel like we have much to say about that. If they're going to be multifamily residential, then whether they're owned or leased or rented is not really so much my concern. But having looked at the site a couple of times now, I have a really hard time imagining that working within the existing buildings without every scrap of parking that there is now. I just don't see how it will be possible to keep parking from overflowing, if you will, off the site without that existing parking.
We have 13 apartment units proposed, and we have 41 or 42 parking spaces.
13 in both buildings?
The one building will be office. There's 11 or 12 spaces directly south of it. We think during the day some of the residential parking will be available for the office, and then at night I don't see how we'd ever use the 40 spaces we have on the 13 units. We've added parking to it since we were here last, and both of the vacant lots, the proposed buildings on those would have their own parking on those lots. So they would not be adding to the burden of the common parking.
And when you say that the one building will be office, we're talking about the football-shaped building?
Yes, ma'am.
And previously, hadn't we talked about it being either?
Yes, and we'd still like to have that option, but if it is office, we see that more as a daytime use than a evening use.
Are you willing to limit it to office?
Am I willing to live in it?
Limit it.
Limit it to office? Yes.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions?
I just want to make sure I understand the special exception. And the special exception is to allow multifamily in one spot, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then in 2 areas to have some condos. And what you're telling me is that, from what I can see in looking at the neighborhood, there's a lot of diversity in there. There's multifamily, there's duplexes, there's quadplexes, there's single family. And so if we do not go forward with this plan and nothing happens there, what happens with the property? It just sits empty?
I guess they would entertain another buyer, but I think there's a strong possibility that it would, parts of it or all of it would sit empty for quite some time.
Okay. Are there any other viable plans that have been suggested for use of the property at this time that you know of?
I know that Sunbeam was approached by one party that was interested in what we refer to the football building as offices. That's the only piece that they were really interested in.
And then you told us today that the Homeowners Association approves this proposal, the special exception? Is there any associations that are in opposition that you're aware of?
Associations?
Associations, groups?
No.
Okay.
Does anybody else have questions?
I do. We had talked about the possibility of putting single-family homes.
We did.
And the recommendation to us is that we approve multifamily.
That's what we would prefer to do. We would like to do for-sale condos, not large units at all, on those 2 lots. One lot would have 2 condo units on it, and the other lot would have no more than 3 units on it.
No more than 3 at the east or west end of the...
West.
Okay. Where there's a parking place and a little bit of an elevation.
There is an elevation change there, and that particular structure backs up to a house that's about 3,400 square feet. So we want to stay in relationship to that.
And how many units on the east side?
2.
Have you talked to the neighbor that's sent us some correspondence?
We've talked to her a couple of times.
What's the latest? I've got a letter here dated the 16th.
I read that letter this morning. She's here today.
I think we, need to give her the opportunity to speak, and anybody else that's here to speak about this application.
Okay. I got several people signed up.
And Marva can rejoin us if need be.
If you'll give me a minute. Shannon Rundell.
Shannon Rundle, 431 Northwest 20th. It's approximately 2 blocks from this property, and I've lived at 431 Northwest 20th for over 30 years. And I am very near the corner of Walker and 20th, and so directly in the block west of me, there are, I think it's 34 units. And in the next block, there are, I think, 16. And then at 22nd and Hudson, there are 16 units on that corner and then in that block. And these have been there. They're the historic buildings, this section of the neighborhood. And when I moved in, I was concerned that I was going to have an apartment building catty corner from my property. It has done nothing but, improve my property value, really, because they've always been well maintained. Most of them have been owned by local people. And the corner of 22nd and Hudson is a good example of over the back fence of the house on the south side of 22nd and Hudson, a single-family residence just sold for $650,000. So I really don't see that multifamily properly done decreases property value. And this is a minimum number of units I think that anybody else would try to do on this property. I think if another developer were doing it, they would probably try to put twice as many units in the historic building. This is only 16 units total. And if you change the 2 lots to single family, you've only saved 3 units. So it just seems to me that there's really no sense in making it be single family. Why not duplex or essentially triplex? Only there'll be condominiums which will be sold. I believe there's a need for this in the neighborhood. There are many people like myself who've been in the neighborhood of 30-plus years, and we really don't want to leave our neighborhood, but yet we don't necessarily want yard upkeep or a big house or a two-story structure or whatever. So I think these would be ideal for people who are already living in the neighborhood. I think we have a local developer who's got a track record. That means a lot to me. I think we've gotten in trouble in the past with people who've come in from out of state, and they leave quickly when it goes bad. So I just think I'm very much in support of this project. The other thing is those 3 bungalows that were the group homes for Sunbeam. I've lived there longer than I think some of the protesters, and, at times there would be, 10, 12 people in those 3 group homes, and those have no on-yard parking or anything. There was traffic in the street. So this, to me, is reducing the density in the area. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Catherine Montgomery.
Catherine Montgomery, Preservation and Design Studio. We're involved with the project as the design architects. Also, there's a historic preservation tax credit component for what we call the Barbell Building. And what Ms. Rundell just talked about was the group homes, which aren't actually part of the dashed area. They are immediately south of it. And those 3 homes currently, accommodate mostly unrelated people, and as she stated, the density. The plan for those is to turn those into single-family properties, so that's why they're not even a part of this request. Since the last time that we were here before you, I just thought I would talk about how this studio has made some revisions to the plans that you saw before. And one of those is, of course, a reduction in the number of units that are proposed for the east side lots and the west side lots. Previously, it was 4 and 2, respectively, and now it is 2 and 3. Each of those properties, as Marva indicated, have parking for those properties, all self-contained. Then we also did a little reconfiguration on the remaining parking area behind the buildings, keeping in mind that the 3 buildings, the group homes, will no longer have parking in that lot, and neither will the newly developed lots on either side. And we are at about 42 spaces. That's 13 units in the Barbell Building and maybe as many as 15 offices in the ARC. So, and then with the trade-off in use based on the hours of operation for both of those properties, we think 42 spaces is quite ample. And then I just wanted to say that, with my long-standing career in historic preservation, there's no way I would be involved in this project if I thought that it would be a detriment to the neighborhood, either as a neighborhood or its historic character. And I think some of the valuation issues that have been brought up, keeping in mind that this property is not a cheap property, and that I think that Midtown Builders is singularly qualified to be the developer for the property. The valuation of the lots themselves exceeds some of the value for some of the single-family homes in the immediate area. So I think I say that only to say that this is a significant investment, both on the part of the developer and just the valuation of the properties themselves, which I think precludes some kind of, like Section 8 housing or something like that, that I think there's a lot of fear in the neighborhood about. So that's it.
Does anybody have questions for Catherine?
Okay. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, thank you. Sherry Helsel. Did I pronounce that right?
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Helsel, and I live at 609 Northwest 21st Street. On your diagram there, if you look, I am almost directly across from the football building. I'm the third structure in from the corner across the street. While I can appreciate the proponents, the longevity of Ms. Rundle, and the fact that she has, property near an apartment complex, I read the letters from the other proponents, and I appreciate the fact that, like they too are entitled to their opinion. The problem that I have is that none of those people live directly across the street. They are not the ones who are going to be affected in their daily lives by the number of people coming and going out of the driveway that, as I said, is just almost directly across from my property. I probably would find it a little more palatable if there was another entrance. There was some discussion about that at one time, and they talked about the drop-off, the 3-foot drop-off on one end. And I'm not totally unaware of construction issues. I've been with Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity for 8 years now, and we have construction challenges that we face every day. I know that, funding and structure issues, engineering issues, and so forth, I know that those are not pleasant for any of us. We have had to overcome those ourselves on more than one occasion, and if anybody's aware of a budget, we are. So I understand that's, part of the issue, but I don't know that they have discussed with an engineer if that's even remotely feasible. To clarify, the only conversations that I have had with Ms. Eller were at the original meeting with the residents. So since that time, we have not had any discussion, so I'm not aware if they've tried to mitigate that with a structural engineer or not. I think I would also be much more comfortable with it if, rather than, in addition to adding more traffic to the street, instead of taking those vacant lots and putting more multifamily on them, if they would restrict those to single-family housing. If there is an issue there with, some of the funding, since they're building 3 single-family on 20th Street, I think alternately they could perhaps entertain the notion of, since there is going to be multifamily on 21st, why not leave the 2 vacant lots as single-family structures and then make condos on 20th Street, so 21st is not bearing the brunt of all the traffic and influx.
Anybody have any questions?
It sounds to me like the traffic in and out of the property for the 13 units is your greatest concern?
That is one of my larger concerns, yes. I do have concerns about the value because as I stated previously, and you guys have some information there, the last letter, I did residential property management for 15 years. It's not what the property is going to look like today. It's what the property is going to be in the future. And even one of the proponents, in his letter, he referred to the relics in the neighborhood as far as some of the multifamily structures there. Well, those did not start out as relics. Those started out as new properties, too. I realize that what Ms. Ellard's group has done is lovely, and I know that, for a number of years it will stay that way. But with any luck, and based on family history, I should be around another 30 years. And so my concern is what that's going to be at that point. So, yes, I have more than one concern related to this project.
Would she have had access to the letter that we've got from Ben Sellers? Do you know who Ben Sellers is?
No, I do not.
He's a property owner north of the neighborhood up around 23rd Street. He's cited his credentials, and it sounds to me like he's qualified, to make the statements. He talks about the parking, and that the parking behind the proposed 13 units is more than adequate and more than would normally be provided. So I don't think parking spaces is an issue. And he also talks about density. He makes the point that under the property's current use, there are 40-plus employees on the site daily, with numerous clients coming and going throughout the workday. This is a very intense use for the middle of a residential neighborhood. The proposed change in use will greatly reduce the traffic coming to and from the property on a regular basis. I think the one thing that we can, realistically acknowledge is if it's housing where Sunbeam's traffic may have been primarily during the workday and perhaps the early evening, you're going to have the opportunity, of course, for people to come and go. The other thing I would say about density is I was one of 3 boys in my family, and I know at times there were 5 cars at the house. And my next-door neighbor has 3 daughters, and many times there are 4 or 5 cars in front of their house. So single family in and of itself does not guarantee you less density, at least, for various times in that family's history. I appreciate your concerns, but I'm going to have to tell you that I'm in favor of this development going forward. Marva is a member of this community and has been very active in this neighborhood and this part of Oklahoma City, and I think that you'll find her and have found her to be sensitive to the concerns. She has a right, just like, the owners of that property have a right to pursue their business interests, and I think they're doing, everything possible to hear and understand your concerns.
I think the other thing that comes to mind with me is, and you talk about the future, and we're all concerned about change, and is it good change, and it will be better for the future. And in this case, I don't hear of any other developer coming in and saying, I would propose we do single family, and I'd be interested in buying it to do single family. And so if we do not go with this plan, or this exception, what does the future hold in store for this property? Does it sit there vacant? Does it get worse? Does it get dilapidated? And so it seems to me that the future could be worse if nothing happens.
Well, and I guess my question would be, as my understanding is that this never actually went on the open market. So, we don't know what other opportunities might be available because there was nobody given that chance.
But we also don't have any other developers that are here today saying we'd like to have the opportunity to do X, Y, or Z.
Does anybody else have questions, comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, J.B. Schuline. Did I get close?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm J.B. Schuline. I live at 404.5 Northwest 22nd. I think, multifamily properties, and I don't want to belabor the point. I think the commissioners have covered this pretty well, so I'll just make a couple of quick points. Multifamily properties have been an important part of the historic character of our neighborhood since its inception. Some of the multifamily properties go back to 1910. I own a couple, one built in 1920 and 1928. I've lived in one of my properties for 28 years. So I really am proud of our neighborhood and like to see the trends that it's going in. The issue of density has been brought up, and I just wanted to point out that in the 500 blocks of 20th, 21st, and 22nd, there are over 30 units. Multifamily units in those 3 blocks adjacent to this property. So I think, as many of you have said, this is an exciting project for our neighborhood. I think it will enhance our neighborhood. I want to speak in support of it, and I appreciate you letting me put my 2 cents in. Thank you.
Okay. Marva?
Any questions or anything that anybody'd like to talk about?
Okay.
Clear, are we or are we not limiting the use of the football building to the ARC to office use? Is it possible for it to be used for residential, or are we limiting it to office use? I want to be clear about that.
When Marva first came to us, one of the things that we were entertaining was working the numbers and seeing what we could get for residential use in the office building. The maximum number of units that we came up with was about 5. So, we think that it should be office use, but that we want to have the opportunity to choose. And just so that you know that if that choice is to put residential in there, the number of units is going to be very small. It's a pretty interesting building on the inside, but not a lot of opportunity for changes to really retain the character of that interior and put housing in it.
But at most, it would be 5 additional units, and that would be sometime in the future. There's no current plans.
I think right now we plan on marketing it as offices. We're not anticipating making changes to residential at this time.
Huh? Anybody else?
I guess I would like to see that made part of the application then, that if it's going to be left flexible, that cap of 5 or that upward limit of 5 units for the building be made part of the application, so that at some point in the future it doesn't become, a hotel or, some sort of rooming house or whatever.
I agree, but my understanding of this, the special exception is to allow for multifamily residential development, and it would be as to all aspects, all portions of the land that are set forth up at the top of the page. And what you're saying is, as far as the football building is concerned, limiting that to no more than 5 units, is that something you're comfortable with?
We're fine.
Are we not having to allow, make provisions in this special exception for the possibility of its continued use as office? That's not part of this application at all?
My understanding of what we were looking at today was the recommendation on the 2 vacant lots and whether multifamily was going to be recommended and whether we approve the special exception that allows that or whether we deny the special exception that would force it to be single family.
It seems to me the way it's crafted right now, it's a special exception to allow multifamily to occur, doesn't have to occur, to occur at 604 through 628 Northwest 21st.
And last meeting when we heard this, even though we continued it, I think, we were of one mind that the only issues before us were the disposition of those 2 vacant lots. Am I remembering correctly?
You are, and I want to clarify this, I think, for our purposes, because you all are the experts on this, is that if the football building continues as office, because it's a non-conforming use in a residential area, we can keep that use as office. But if we abandon that use for, Dan, is it 2 years? Then it would revert to R1. Is that correct, JJ?
That's correct.
So that was...
And what you have actually before you is there's caps on all these buildings. There's 3 on the west end, 13, 2 on the other end, but there's no limit on the football building. But if they're willing to accept 5, you could put a cap of 5 residential units on the football building.
And as Commissioner Austin stated, our main thought was what Catherine calls the barbell building, we call the big building. We want to feel very comfortable that we can use that as a multifamily use along with the condo uses on the vacant lots and continue to use the football building as office. And if we ever do contemplate it being residential, it would be no more than 5 units.
I'd make a motion to approve the special exception with a limitation on what we calling the football building to be limited to 5 units. If you try to go beyond 5 units, you'd have to come back in front of this board.
That's agreeable.
Okay, we've got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And motion and seconds. No other discussion. Cast your votes. Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady.
Item number 4, case number 13870, request of the Land Run Group for a variance to the arterial sidewalk requirement located at 10545 Northwest 10th Street.
Hi, I'm Julie Landis, and I'm for the Land Run Group, and we represent the property owner.
Could you pull it? Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, Julie Landis. I represent the property owner. And I have this, which I realize you may not be able to see.
Do you want to hand it up here and I'll pass it around? Great. Thank you.
And these are pictures that we took yesterday of, this is at the corner of Sarah and 10th Street. And there are some specialties about this piece of property that, some problems that we have with putting a sidewalk in. The pictures in the book are roughly the same order that this is. It starts out down the road between Sarah and Morgan on that north side, kind of showing what that ditch line looks like all the way through there. There's not really a flat spot next to the road before it just starts that ditch. Then this power pole, which should be about the 5th or 6th picture in there, is right at the corner, and what I'm calling or what my engineer calls a field drain inlet. And there's several pictures of that, and there's probably a grade difference of 5 feet right there at that corner. And then you can see this is the large drainage structure that goes north and south along Sarah Road. And apparently a car ran into it at some point because the fences, this end guardrail is gone and the fence is kind of jacked up. And then the very last picture is the traffic light pole that's at the corner. And then we actually went out there and took some measurements. Between the curb and the traffic light pole, there is 2 feet. No, I'm sorry, not between the curb, between the face of the curb, the edge of the street, edge of the pavement and the pole, there's 2 feet. Between the pole and the guardrail here is 4 feet. And then when you go on down Sarah Road here, between the face of the pavement and the guardrail is about 6 feet in width.
I've looked at this pretty closely, and from what I can tell is your primary problems are topography, the drainage canal,
right,
existing poles that make it impossible, darn near impossible, to put in an ADA compliant sidewalk.
Exactly.
And it's not your intent to not build this sidewalk just to save costs.
Right. It's just we're not really sure how to do it with
you could spend $1 zillion and maybe build something,
exactly.
But it's
we can build a lift and transport them across, but
Yep.
So that's really sort of my question, and I guess it's more a question for staff. I mean, it seems to me that the argument that's being made anyway is that this is just not possible to do, basically, short of spending $1 million to do it.
Yeah.
And so my question to staff is this the way that we deal with things that are impossible? People have to pay a Board of Adjustment fee and come down here and convince us? I mean, that's really it?
An ordinance requirement.
There's not some mechanism through the process of permitting or whatever where they go, well, this is crazy. I mean, no? They have to come here and do this?
They do.
We get to come visit you.
The only other option is they could pay a fee in lieu of constructing the sidewalk, but that's only available if there's a city-approved and funded project to widen the street within sidewalks.
Okay, so that's my next question. We don't have any known at this time definite plans to do anything different with this area.
No.
Is it possible for us to in any way condition the variance that they're seeking so that when and if someday that happens and it becomes somehow more possible? The swaled drainage looks to me like it might be rife at some point in the future to be enclosed, and perhaps at that point it would be possible to put a sidewalk over that. So the question is it possible for us to do that, to at least say, well, if this changes topographically, if it becomes more possible later?
What we've done in the past is we have granted the variance conditioned in time, say for 3 years, and they come back in 3 years and let us know if there are changes in circumstances or there are funds that can be paid into so dollars can be used elsewhere.
What would that time be in a realistic world? I'm not thinking 3 years, like 5 years, 10 years? I mean...
In this area?
Yeah, 10. Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions, comments?
I'd make a motion to approve the variance conditioned on the fact that they will return in 10 years to revisit this.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? If not, cast your votes. 10 years.
We probably won't be here.
All right, thank you.
Item number 5, case number 13873, request of Marty Coltrane for a variance to allow a 2,508 square foot accessory building exceeding the maximum 1,000 square foot requirement and encroaching the 15-foot side building line and the 5-foot interior side setback located at 424 Northwest 38th Street.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm back and live at 424 Northwest 38th. I'm requesting the 2 variances. I gave you guys all the paperwork last time I was here. I don't know if you have it, the site plan and such. I don't know if you have used any copies of that again. Okay.
How did it go with your neighbor?
Huh?
How did it go with your neighbor?
I think we're getting ready to hear.
He's here.
Oh, okay.
I spoke with my neighbor about the project and agreed that I would seek my engineer. I've got an engineer that I'm using to do the basement room and that part of it, and a retaining wall, and he's going to help me with the drainage as well. And I spoke with Dr. Massett about that.
Does anybody have any questions for Marty? Okay, your turn,
I
Stephen.
guess the one question I had, are we looking at anything any different today than we did 2 weeks ago or however long ago
Just
that
one
was?
clarification, I think from last time when we were talking about the basement room as it was brought up, I had gone in front of the city engineer and he, Adair Agrawal, about the basement, and that's why I started this project to see if we could put the basement room in, and he said, no, you cannot do that. And I spoke with my engineer about that, and my engineer said, yes, you can do that. And I don't know if they talked to each other or not, but after I met with you guys last time, I went back to Adair's office, and he said, you can put that basement room in. You just need to get a conditional LOMA.
A conditional what?
LOMA, letter of map amendment for FEMA.
Oh, okay.
So that is in fact possible, and that is back in the plan as of now.
You got a basement room under the cabana.
Under the cabana, exactly, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Marty? Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, members of the board. This Stephen Doty, 210 Park Avenue, Suite 700, on behalf of Dr. Massett, who lives at 416 Northwest 38th, the property immediately to the east, adjacent. As has kind of been indicated, we can call us what we want. Nothing really has changed since the last time we were here. Mr. Coleman has spoken to Dr. Massett. However, there's been no engineering provided whatsoever. What he's told us is, well, I'll have an engineer involved, but he's done nothing to give any assurances about what that engineering would be before we start moving dirt. And I thought that was part of the plan that we had talked about the last time we were here, and we tabled to come back here. What I've also now heard, and I did not hear, and Dr. Massett did not confirm this to me, is that once again, as I pointed out last time, we have a moving target because we did have a basement, we didn't have a basement, now we may have a basement again. And so I don't know that we still know exactly what this is going to be involved, and that's Dr. Massett's biggest concern, is the unknown. And the point that I would still then make here, and I thought about this after the last time that we were all here, we started to talk about how, well, the reality of the structure that is proposed really isn't the full 2,500 square foot. It's a smaller, it's a cabana with a covered porch, but you have to include the whole thing. The fact of the matter is the proposed development involves that many square feet and the topography of a fairly limited backyard that has a very steep, precipitous drop-off into the swale, the drainage, the creek in the back. And there are already drainage and erosion concerns that are there. What Mr. Coleman wants to do is remove an existing retaining wall. and then construct another one that there has been no plans provided for, no engineering for. And he has to remove that first. And as the board pointed out the last time, if the variance is granted, he's out there moving dirt. And nobody knows at this point in time which shovel load of dirt is the one that's going to cause the problem that we can never come back from. Once this toothpaste is out of the tube, it's not going back in there. And so until we can know the answer to what this would do in terms of changing the water flow off the top of that land and how that would affect the neighbor immediately to the east and further down, frankly, once the erosion starts. And as I pointed out last time, Dr. Massey, when he purchased the property 6 years ago, he already had settling issues back there and piers had to get put in there. Mr. Coleman's been there less than 6 months and wants a hardship variance to go do something that has somehow arisen in 6 months that he should have known or could have known about before he purchased the property. We just don't know enough right now, and the fear that we have, and of course, as we pointed out, we can come back into court, but once this starts happening, I don't know what the funds are to go try to remediate if we have a problem. And he's made mention, last time we were here, that he has an engineer, he's done a project like this in the past in Norman, and yet if that's so, where's the engineering? That ought to be at hand and easy for us to go see so we can know and answer those concerns. Dr. Massett isn't here just to say, no, 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 and you can't use your property. His concerns are very real, and he's brought that up, and he at least had an engineer who came in and said, and that was submitted last time he was here, that engineer has concerns about this proposed development, and we haven't seen anything from an engineer that says and answers what those concerns might be.
Just so I'm clear, who was the engineer? Is there an engineer that was here last time you spoke?
No, it was my understanding.
All I'm hearing on your side of the fence is that there's possible problems. And do you have any engineering reports or any engineers that can speak to this?
It was not a full report. There was a letter that Dr. Massett had submitted from an engineer that had briefly reviewed what little information he had from Mr. Coleman and said, this does raise concerns. Now, it wasn't a formal engineering report on his behalf.
Is he here to speak today on this?
No, other than the letter that was submitted before.
Sure. And you acknowledge that he has to go through the city with building permits before he can do anything, and he's mentioned this Loma letter that he has to receive before he can build the basement. And there's also, if there's some concerns on your client's part, he has the right to file a district court action to protect his property, correct?
And yes, I acknowledge that, and I understand that. I know that when we were here last, and I thought part of the point was to try to go, as the board says, good neighbors be good neighbors, and to try to encourage some of the engineering work up. It seemed like that could be done before we start moving dirt, because, and I understand, Mr. Stoneside, for the points you're making. However, as we know, once the variance is granted, now he can start moving dirt before we have the full he's going to tear down that retaining wall so we can go put a new one in there. And that's the whole point, is I just don't know what that effect is going to have here. And it would seem like, under the circumstances, and given what Mr. Coleman has stated, he would have access to engineering who could at least come and tell us, well, if we do this, here's what's going to happen. And that simply hasn't been provided. And that's been the question that Dr. Massad's raised from the get-go.
Did Dr. Massad, since we continued it, did he make an effort to go over, did either party make an effort to sit down with each other and talk about this?
According to Dr. Massad, now of course I wasn't there, and I will defer to Mr. Coleman. He said they did speak one time, and that Mr. Coleman had said, well, there'll be an engineer involved, and that engineer will be involved in all phases of the project as we go through to help out. But there was nothing giving an assurances at this point in time as to what's going to happen. And he did indicate they'd be tearing down the existing retaining wall that exists to go build another one that an engineer will help him design to allow for the drainage. What wasn't mentioned, and what was mentioned for the first time here, to my knowledge, was, oh, by the way, now I found out maybe I can do the basement, and so that's back on the table, or back in his mind as a possibility, and that wasn't discussed.
Do you have an engineer?
Yeah, I have spoke with Mike Hancock. He is with Basement Contractors, and he is the engineer that does all the work. He would be building the retaining wall and putting the basement room in.
So has he been hired, or is he to be hired?
I am in negotiations with him to get it done. I haven't actually hired him yet, and he's been really busy the last few weeks, and I haven't yet got that taken care of, but I was really waiting to get the project approved before I hired him. I have to have an engineer to move forward with this, though.
I'm not going to be able to support this without engineering support and documentation that addresses the concerns of the neighbors and adequately, addresses concerns over drainage and other engineering issues. I think, I agree that, the last time when we continued this, the intent was for you to come back with documentation that provided the assurance for Dr. Masson that, the job was properly engineered, properly designed. And I understand their concerns too because, basement, not basement, basement. So I can't support.
It has to be engineered to put it in.
But for the assurance of your neighbor, I think, and for this body, for me, I'm going to need to see that.
Okay. Is there a way we could continue this to the next docket? You bring Mr. Hancock in and he give an engineering's perspective as to why this will not create a nuisance for your neighbor, Dr. Masson.
And I don't want the engineer just to appear. I want the engineer to appear and having been to the site and prepared, a report that adequately addresses the concerns.
I agree.
Because one of the concerns in the DeFranco letter was how are we doing the retaining wall, reinforced, so on and so forth. So if you could have your guy address that. It was in the DeFranco letter.
I didn't hear what you said.
There was mention in the Patty DeFranco letters, concerns about the retaining wall, reinforcing steel, lateral loads. So
let me give you a copy of it.
Yeah, if you look at that,
yeah,
and have your engineer address that too. Okay. That's something I was worried about.
I was going to say, just to be clear about this, though, he could go tear out the retaining wall tomorrow and build another one. That is not part of this application.
And I could also, too, get a building permit to build a slightly smaller structure tomorrow without all of this. So this is kind of...
Right.
I'm all in favor of neighbors being good neighbors and all that, but in terms of what's in front of us and what we're looking at, it has to do with the little bit that his garage is sticking out in the side yard.
It's a
the existing building, that he's going to now use for pool equipment, and then just the overall size, square footage of what he's wanting to put out there. So I'd love to hear from his engineer, but I'm not really sure that's part of what we're being asked.
We may not be able to require it, but I think, if you proceed with this and you end up with drainage problems, I think you can look forward to,
and I don't want to end up with drainage problems, and I'm doing all in good faith to not have that problem. Especially don't want to have that problem, being that it's brought up, and I don't want a lawsuit filed against me. So I'm going to do every part of my goodwill to make sure that doesn't happen.
Then I would take into account their concerns and, do some things that you may not be required to do, but it may be wise to be prudent and to do everything that you can.
Sure.
If there's got to be an engineer, go ahead and do the engineering report in advance of starting your work and assure them that the job is properly engineered, properly designed, and that we're not creating new problems for your neighbor.
I just feel like this is being delayed for an issue that's
the one piece of this that is definitely part of what we're talking about square footage-wise is the basement. We need to know, is it going to be a basement or not? Is it, properly engineered or not? Is it going to cause any kind of, drainage or settling or whatever for your property or his? So that part of it I think we do need to hear about, for sure.
Are you comfortable with the continuance?
I guess.
What's the next meeting date, Kathy?
It'll be May 1st.
Does that give you enough time do you need more time?
No, that's fine.
Make a motion to continue this case to May 1st.
Motion is second. No other discussion. Cast your votes. Okay. So you may want.
Item number 6, case number 13876, request of Lindsay Oker for a variance to allow 2 dwellings on one lot to permit a garage apartment located at 1118 Northwest 13th Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the board. For the record, my name is Pat Downs, and I'm appearing at the request of the property owner, Lindsay Oker, who is a longtime personal friend. This is an issue involving, again, density. The property in question was probably built, as best we can tell, somewhere between 1909 and 1911. It had fallen into serious disrepair, it is in the R3 district, and so it's fine to have multiple dwelling units, but only if they are attached. I will tell you, having seen the property before Mr. Oker began his restoration work, it was in fact a three-dwelling property, but I don't think there was probably a single square foot in the entire place that met any kind of code. It was hazardous, it was gross, it was a problem. Mr. Oker has, at considerable expense, turned this from a derelict property that he purchased at a sheriff's auction to an executive-level home with all of the amenities that one might expect of that sort of a thing. There was in the backyard a two-story garage apartment structure, which had been built, again, many, many years ago. It had fallen into such disrepair that it was demolished. There's a demolition permit on record, and so that was demolished. Unfortunately, he would like to replace that with a similar structure, basically on the same footprint. It backs up to a rather nice and extremely well-maintained city alleyway that's a permanent facility, and it's one of the rare occasions when you find a 100% brick-paved alleyway in the inner city that hasn't been pirated. So it's actually, with a couple of pothole exceptions, it's really in pretty good shape. So Mr. Oker would like to be able to approach the property from the rear, which is how it was designed back in its origin, and would like to be able to park vehicles not on the street, but in a garage, and then to have available that second floor as it was originally developed for a dwelling unit. And so that is what we are seeking today, is simply a variance to allow him to replace the structure that was demolished with a new structure that meets all of those code requirements. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
So are the garage doors going to open onto the alley?
Yes. And there are, if you go down that alley, which I did have, there are other properties very similar which also still have their garage apartment two-story structures intact, which sort of validates or verifies what we believed historically was the case and the pattern in this neighborhood.
Just out of curiosity, is there an active homeowners association in this area? And I mean, it's outside the scope of HP, so you can build. You know, I mean, you have latitude in terms of what you build. But these homes are, you know, historic and of similar age as those neighborhoods to the east.
To our knowledge, there is not. There is a new, actually a facility just directly across the street to the north that is kind of a public services sort of a facility. Very nice, very well built. And I believe they have multiple dwelling units there. But as far as we're aware, there are no, there are neighbors, but there is not a formal neighborhood association. We, of course, gave notice per the requirement, and there were no protests. And in fact, this home, should you allow us to proceed, will no doubt be the nicest in this area, and our hope is that it will raise the bar and perhaps encourage others to do some of this infill restoration that I think stabilizes the area and is a benefit to the inner city.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
I have no objection to your application, and applaud, you know, those pioneers that go into neighborhoods that have deteriorated for years to begin to bring them back. I'd make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any other discussion? If not, cast your votes. There we go. You're approved.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7, case number 13877, request of Robert and Deborah Monet for a variance to the 10-foot platted side yard setback on the east side located at 2641 West Wilshire Boulevard.
My name is Bob Monette. It's, as stated, we're just asking for a variance to better accommodate the location of the home that we've designed to sit on the lot. And we just want to shift it over a little bit so we can accommodate a better parking and garage area, primarily to help conceal the garage from the street, which, in our opinion, will help maintain value for all the properties.
And you're requesting this due to the fact that it's an odd-sized very narrow lot, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware any of the neighbors opposed?
There's none that I'm aware of. We have spoke to the homeowner behind us, explained to them what we were doing. Also, the neighbor on the east, which would directly be adjacent to that variance, he was more than excited about what we're going to do.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second. Motion and a second. No other discussion. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 8, case number 13878, application for special exception of Troy Lawless to allow a mobile home to serve as a temporary second dwelling to relieve a medical hardship located at 14801 Southeast 59th Street.
Hi, my name is Susan Lawless, and I'm a representative of the Lawless Family Trust, with which this property that we're discussing is inside of. He will be 87 years old on Saturday, and over the last 9 months or a year has declined quite a bit and is starting to lose his memory and those kinds of things. He has a 10-acre piece of property out there, and what we're asking is that we be given permission from my younger brother to purchase a brand-new mobile home to put in behind his house so that somebody can be there with him for most of the time.
Any of the neighbors opposed to this that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of. And we went out 800 or 1,000 square feet to find the, numbers that we needed to be able to apply.
Anybody have questions?
What is don't we usually put a conditional period on this? Is that right? 3 years?
3 years.
Okay. You understand that? That it's a
Right,
3-year
we do
period?
understand that.
And his name is Troy?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I'd make a motion to approve the application with a 3-year limitation and to tell Troy happy birthday.
Thank you.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, cast your votes. You're approved.
Item number 9, case number 13879, request of Blanca Tapia for a variance to the required number of parking spaces to permit an event center located at 3264 Southwest 44th Street.
Give us your name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Blanca Tapia.
Thank you. What's your address?
30.
I'm sorry, I'm going to help Rashid.
Very good.
Yes, I speak that much English. The address is 3264 Southwest 44.
Okay. Tell us about your application.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to open an event center. They only have 19 spaces on the back of the building. But before this building, it was used as a daycare, and they used the front of the building as a parking lot. And they had about seven parking lots up front. And since there's no more spaces to build parking lots in the back, they wanted to use those parking lots.
Could you tell us more about the kind of activities that you intend to hold in the event center?
Well, they're trying to build, open an event center for family events like baptisms, birthdays, small family reunions. Excuse me? No, not weddings. Birthdays.
Sounds like family gatherings, neighborhood family gatherings.
Yeah.
Baby shower.
Baby showers.
Well, if there were more than 19 cars for the families in attendance, where would they park?
That's what they're thinking to do. Is park on the front of the building, which will be about 7 more parking lots, and also on Independence Street, which is on the east side. It's also about 6 more parking lots that they were using when this building was a daycare.
JJ, when it was a daycare, it only had 19 parking spaces. Is that right? I take it? When it was used as a daycare, it only had 19 parking spaces?
Yeah, there's 19 spaces there now.
And there's know where to add additional parking spaces with the existing building, correct? So the only alternative they would have is to knock down the building and start over.
Right.
Okay. I'm just asking. Yeah.
Your application has a proposed solution that says limit the quantity of people that are allowed. What limitation are you thinking?
Well, they can limit the amount of people that's going to go in there.
To what? What number? Did you have a...
¿Cuántos números? About 70.
74. How big's
The
the
concern
building?
is that you have, people, you invite them to an event and there's no place for them to safely park. I don't see parking, on 44th as being really the answer. You've got fast-moving traffic, probably limited visibility, and the opportunity for somebody, to have an accident or get hurt. And in deference to the neighbors around, it's not fair to allow your guests to street park in front of their homes. And so the question for us is not to deny you the opportunity to use this building, but how do we manage it so that you're not overusing it, or that you have more people there than you can park in the parking that you have available.
How big's the building? How many square feet's the building?
The building, ¿qué tan grande es el building?
¿Qué tanto es el building? ¿Te acuerdas qué tamaño es el building?
26,000 feet.
I'm going to go with 2,600.
Yeah, 2,600 square feet.
Yeah. Probably.
That's not a very big building.
One story.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But the zoning code requires 50 spaces for a building that size.
For this type of use, it's an assembly.
The event center is what triggers the requirement for 50.
Pumps it up.
Limiting to 70 strikes me as a little high.
Yeah, if you figure if you have 19 spaces,
It took some...
cars had 2, that's the third, and the rest of it had...
So if it were a child care center and they had company from time to time, then...
Mind if I show you this pictures that they took of the cars?
You already purchased the property?
Yes, they already bought the property.
I would ask staff, is there another use that would be in line with what it appears the applicant's intentions are that would be something other than an event center? Could it be a community hall or a reclassified as something else where they might be alleviated of some of the requirement for parking?
Well, when they first bought this building, it used to be a daycare, and it had 7 parking lots right up front, and by Independence Street, they also have about 5 parking lots, and now the land on the back, they only allow us to build another 19 parking lots. So what they're trying to do, they want to see if they can use the 19 parking lots on the back and also the about 11 parking lots at the front, and that will make a little more.
But it still leaves you about short by half. I'm still not sure that that's adequate parking. And staff, is there any other use that might alleviate them of some of the parking requirements?
Yeah,
19 and 7.
There appears to be spaces across the front and down the side.
Son 32, ¿no?
Yeah.
Possibly office. I don't even know if it would meet a retail parking. It was built as a daycare. Daycares generally require very little parking.
It's already zoned C3, you can put a lot in C3.
So even if they use the 19 spaces on the back and the size, that will make only 32 spaces, which the minimum was, I think, 30.
It may be that for this use, this proposed use, you simply don't have enough parking. It was enough for a child care center. And it might be enough or close to enough for some other uses. But I don't believe it's enough for an event center. Because the nature of an event center is that you use that building for people to gather for, an event, a celebration or something like that. And I don't think you can reasonably, fill those spaces and just let the overflow parking.
Sí, dice que no es razonable, dice son 50 mínimos parking lots. Dice que puedes usarlo para otras cosas más, pero que no pueden usarlo para una reunión y nada de eso, porque no alcanzaría a toda la gente ahí. Lo mínimo son 50. No quiere nada menos.
I guess one thing they could do is move to continue this application, see if they could sit down and visit with staff and come up with some other use or come up with some other idea on parking and resubmit the application modified. That's probably about as good as it gets today for you. And so you might want to continue it for a month, meet with staff, and see if you can come up with a plan B.
Dice que lo que la recomienda es que muevan esta citación que tuvieron hoy de esta corte y que vean qué otra cosa pueden hacer. Te puedes reunir con la ciudad y ver qué otra cosa pueden hacer, pero que esta de aquí no lo van a aceptar ellos. Y pueden mover esta corte como para un mes más.
Dice que para los eventos no puede.
No, pero puede trabajar para otra cosa más. Le dijimos que sí.
Pues sí, no, dice que no pueden dar para los eventos. Pero
if they think about opening like a restaurant, would this work?
Okay.
Like a
Do you
restaurant?
want to move to continue this for 30 days so you can sit down and talk with staff so your application isn't rejected today? Would that be okay?
Yes.
All right, what's...
May 15th.
Okay, I'm going to move that this application be continued to May 15th. You can meet with staff and maybe come up with some alternative ideas. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
There's a motion, we got a second?
Second.
Motion is second, no other discussion, cast your votes. We'll see you on May 15th.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recuse myself from case number 10.
Item number 10, case number 13881, request of Elliott and Associates for a variance to the sign regulations located at 3503 Northwest 63rd Street.
Hi, I'm Ken Fitzsimmons of Task Design here on behalf of Elliott and Associates.
Tell us a little bit about your application.
Okay, it's a very large tract of land that's at the corner of 63rd Street and Hefner Parkway along the frontage road, and there are two buildings here, the Atrium Towers, and they've been there for quite some time, and there's quite a bit of land around the area, and then there's another office building to the west that also sits on a large tract of land, 10 acres, so there's quite a bit of space between these properties, and the buildings are, the two Atrium Towers are 6 stories, the building to the west, I believe, is 3 or 4 stories tall. And at this time, the 2 buildings are being leased by our client, or a portion of one is being leased by our client, and the south one is being leased by our client. and the owner also is leasing a portion of the north tower. And they would like to put attached signs on the building facing the Hefner Parkway. There is one thing that we've changed, or that the client has requested since this application. On this application, it shows one of the signs on the west side of the north tower. They would like that actually to be on the east side of the north tower so that it faces Hefner Parkway. And the reason that we're asking for this is that we're not clear completely on the why the size was limited in the staff report to 50 square feet per attached sign. We had thought it was a little bit larger, but nevertheless, we were asking for an increase in that size because of the height of these buildings and the setback to be visible to the streets. If we limit them to 50 square feet, it would be very difficult to read these signs from the street. And we think that with the location being on a busy freeway such as this and a busy street and being set back and high up, that it's still in scale with the overall surroundings.
You aware of any opposition? Does anybody have any questions?
I guess the reason for the variance is because of the peculiar positioning of the buildings sitting on the property, and this is to guide people to the location that will come into business, correct?
Correct. If this were, for example, zoned as commercial, the signage requirement, you're allowed substantially larger sign, and we wouldn't even be here, I don't think, if it were zoned differently as well. So, just as a comparison of the one thing that hurts this as far as the size is it's office zoned, and we think with the location that, commercial zone would still be appropriate. So just as a comparison of the amount of signage.
Remind me what the signs will say.
One would say AEP, and another one would say Loves.
Okay. So 3 letters, ADP and Loves.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
The sign ordinance is there for a reason. I don't see anything peculiar about the property that would require it to be varied here. The fact that it's multi-story is, something that was taken into account when the sign ordinance was passed. I think it's got all the signage it needs and would not be in favor of it, so I wouldn't second the motion.
I can second just so we can vote, can't I?
Okay.
Okay, I'll second it. We got a motion and a second to approve. No other discussion. Cast your votes. Oh. We'll see you May 1. You got to have 3 votes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Item number 11, case number 13885.
Oh, yeah, we need one more.
Request of Larry B. Schwartz for a variance to the minimum lot width and minimum lot size located at 12309 and 12317 Southeast 98th Street.
Okay. Larry, I can't vote on this one, so I'm going to ask Mark to chair. I have to recuse.
Okay, I just right. Would you please give me a full name and address for purpose?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Schwartz. This is my father, Larry Schwartz. He's the subject landowner, and it's at 9800 South Anderson Road is his address. Okay. I'm going to be actually building one of the proposed houses, so I was going to give you a quick background since I'm the one that did the paperwork and worked with my dad to get it submitted. This land has been with the family since the land run, passed down through the generations, and in the 1980s, my grandpa broke it up and gave it to his sons, which would be my dad and his 3 brothers. These 1.3 acre lots in question went to his brothers. And since then, in the 90s, my dad bought out his other brothers and now owns all the land. And since that time, we've always thought of them as being buildable. It was my grandpa's intent to allow his sons to build on this land. And to further show that, he put an easement in to be able to access it from the addition that's next to it through Swartz Drive. And that way you could still build back there and access it from that addition. That's kind of the history and the reason we're here. One other point I'd like to make is These two places where we're wanting to build are really the only two places left on the property to build. There's kind of a valley that goes to the north of where we're wanting to build, and so it floods. It gets pretty wet when it's rainy. We've actually got some trucks stuck in there, and it can get pretty muddy. So without a lot of work, you couldn't build anywhere else but these two places. We do understand why these rules are in place to keep the country agricultural land looking and being consistent with the area, but we do think our houses and our layout will be consistent with the area, especially with the addition right next door. We are going to adhere to the building permit rules and have 50 feet between the houses, 25 on each side of the property line. And so we think it'll still flow nicely with the addition. And we would like to do it in the easiest, best way possible. Thank you.
So the basis of your application is premised upon topography and flooding, correct?
Yes, and that these lots were broken up in the 80s with the intent to build. They just didn't realize they weren't buildable at that time.
And do you have any neighbors that are here today protesting that you're aware of?
Not that I know of.
Have you received any protest letters or any neighbors objecting?
No objection letters. We received a support letter, but no objection letters.
Yeah, I saw Mr. Garner supports the application. I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
You can't do that as the chair, can you?
Oh, I can't. I'm sorry. I forgot I was the chair. That's funny. I'm
I'll
sorry.
make a motion to approve the variance.
Second. Call for the vote.
Favor say aye. It's heartbound. You are approved. Thanks for coming today.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
I did a horrible job in your absence. I really messed this up.
Okay, let's go back and start over. Number one.
Thank you for giving us the chance to go out and work that out with the landowners that protested, Mr. Garrison, Mrs. Cox. We've come to the agreement that we will hire a third-party person to test the water levels. Excuse me. The process will be covered 100% financially by GasStar for the initial water test. It'll be done before we undergo any drilling operations, and the results will be given to Mrs. Cox and Mr. Garrison for their review.
I would tell you this, a lot of oil and gas companies are doing this voluntarily these days, and just make sure you split your samples.
Yes, sir.
I'd make a motion to approve.
And since Mrs. Cox has left the room, I'm assuming that she is in agreement with you all.
And we did agree to make this,
we wanted to make it part of the record. So.
Yes.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any other discussion? If not, cast your votes. You're approved.
You're approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Vote. Okay.